Welcome everybody to our first virtual open house for the Township of Tiny new zoning bylaw. We're just waiting for all the participants to log in, and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we're ready to get started then. I don't see any more participants joining at this point. So welcome everyone to the new tiny zoning bylaw public open house. This is the first of two sessions. And thanks for taking the time today to join us. So with that, Wes, perfect. Thanks, Wes. So I'd like to introduce the project team. From the Township of Tiny, there's myself, Sean Prasad, the Director of Planning and Development. In planning, we also have Sandra Matson, our planner, Robert Scazzaro, our GIS and IT specialist, as well as Pamela Zimmerman, also in planning. And then we have our consulting team, Wes Crown and Jamie Robinson from MHBC Planning. So we're going to start off this afternoon with a presentation on how to view the new zoning bylaw. I'm going to do a little demonstration for everyone to show you how to actually navigate the schedules. And then we'll get into the key directions in the new draft zoning bylaw. And then we'll end with questions and comments and next steps. So I'll just kind of go through some of the legislation first and run through how the open house is going to run this afternoon. So we're holding this virtual statutory public open house regarding the draft new zoning bylaw pursuant to sections 34 of the Planning Act. The township and council has identified community consultation and participation as key priorities for this project. All participants are expected to adhere to the following governing principles and guidelines. The statutory public open house will maintain a welcoming, inclusive atmosphere at all times, regardless of any individual's perspective, and all participants will be treated with respect and courtesy. The focus will remain on principles before personalities. So this is the first of two sessions. The second one, which will be identical to this, will be held at 6 p.m. Comments and questions will be accepted during the open house solely through the Zoom question and answer function, and then oral responses will be provided. If anybody who's using a laptop or on your cell phone or tablet, you'll see a Q&A icon, and there'll be questions that will read out, and then you'll get an oral response. Every effort will be made to keep questions and comments on topic, and any questions or comments that fall outside the scope of the bylaw may not be answered during the open house. Questions and comments will be read aloud, followed by an oral response, and every effort will be made to address each question. If resources are needed in providing a response, for example, like a link to a web page, we will do that in the response area of the question and answer feature. Where we do not have all the relevant information at hand to answer a question, we may ask a participant to email their question directly to the project web email, newzoningbylaw@tiny.ca, so that a more thorough response can be provided, or would recommend setting up an appointment with staff to sit down in the office to do that. So with that, Wes, if you want to stop sharing your screen for a second, perfect, and I can share my screen. I'm going to walk everybody through how to operate the interactive zoning map. So the first step is to go to the Township of Tiny website, www.tiny.ca. And if you go to Business and Development and then click on Planning and Development, that will take you to the Planning and Development webpage. The next step would be for you to click on the new zoning bylaw icon. And this is the project webpage. So this has all the relevant information, the statutory open house, of course, at the top of the page. And there's 3 links in this box. The first one is the notice of the open house. The second one is the draft new zoning bylaw text. That's the actual written part of the bylaw. And then the third one, which I'm going to walk through right now, is the new interactive zoning map. And that's how to see what a property is zoned. So I'll just click that and open that up. So once this is opened up, there's a few ways to navigate this map. I'm just going to walk you through how to search an address or a roll number. So if you I'm just going to use the Township of Tiny Municipal Office as an example. So I'm just going to type in here 130 Palm Beach Road West. And actually, an address will start to come up, and I'll just click enter to get to that. And the interactive map will actually take you straight to the property. And you can see, I can see from this property that there's an I, which is zoned. I know that this property is zoned institutional. And if you're not sure what one of the zoning codes means, you'll have to go to the text part of the document and read up on that. And it also shows the address. So that's one way. You can, if the property is vacant and you have a roll number, you can also type in the roll number, then the long number that starts with 43688 that's on a municipal tax bill. That will also call up a property. I'll just zoom out now, and you'll see that there's some different colors here. And in order to see what these means, I'll just click over here on the top left under layers, and I'll start to open up these folders just by hitting the little plus button. So that will show us what these colors mean. So this lighter red is the Nipissing Ridge overlay. And then over here, we also have overlays with regards to the wellhead protection area. And then over here, we have this purple color is the Huroney Airport overlay. Now, Jamie and Wes will get a little bit more into detail as to what overlays are. And again, the details of this, the overlays are also in the zoning bylaw. So you can also scroll around the map to see what a property is owned. I'm just going to go into the Perkinsfield Park property. And if I click on that, it will show the address as well as the roll number. And I can see that this property is zoned OS, which I know is open space. But if you weren't sure what that was, you'd have to go back to the text portion of the bylaw. So that's kind of a one-on-one on the interactive map. And of course, if you have any questions navigating through this, please get in touch with us and we can assist. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'm just going to hand things over to Jamie and Wes to continue on with the presentation. And we're just going to go through the presentation this morning. And I see questions are starting to come in. What we'll do is we'll save all the questions for the end. I'll read them out, and then we'll have Jamie, Wes, and myself answer those. So I'll hand things over to Jamie and Wes. Thank you.
All right, thanks, thanks, Sean, for the introduction. So Wes and I, we're going to tag team this presentation. I'll take the first few slides and then hand it over to Wes. And then, as Sean mentioned, we'll be around for questions after. And again, to Sean's point, if you can enter questions in the chat function at the bottom, that would be very helpful, as it ensures that we've cataloged them correctly and allows us to respond to those questions and comments. So first off, where have we been and what's been completed so far? So there was a workshop completed with council back in May of 2021. Following that, we released a technical memorandum that detailed some of the key components to be considered as part of the zoning bylaw process. There was a survey that was conducted later that year, and a follow-up memorandum completed that provided a summary of what was contained throughout the survey. Then later in early of this year, so just over a month ago, or just about a month ago, we released the first draft of the bylaw, and that's what today's meeting is about. It's an opportunity for us to provide an overview of some of the key elements of the bylaw in this open house format, and then to have an opportunity for some questions and some answers to be provided to those comments. So next slide, Wes. So just in terms of some of the implementing the new OP, or the new official plan that was recently adopted by the township and approved by the county of Simcoe, that document's now in full force and effect. One of the requirements under the Planning Act is that within 3 years of establishing a new official plan, municipalities are required to update their zoning bylaw. And that's precisely the exercise that's being undertaken right now. And this new zoning bylaw for the township, it will implement the official plan, both the schedules that are provided in the official plan and the mapping, but it also implements the various policies throughout the official plan that require new zoning regulations or updated zoning bylaw regulations. So as part of this exercise, you'll see new maps or new schedules, and you'll see new and modified text to the bylaw. In terms of the what you'll see, again, as I was just mentioning, you'll see much of the land use structure in the zoning bylaw is fairly similar to the current bylaw. You'll see some new nomenclature, however, that aligns with what we see in the official plan. An example of that is that we find in the Greenlands zone, in the EP2 zone, is it aligns more closely with the language that's in the official plan that deals with the Greenlands designation in that new OP. So there's some alignment with the language between the two documents, and that's some of the differences that you'll see in the new zoning bylaw. In terms of the structure is fairly similar to what you've seen in the current zoning bylaw. The way a zoning bylaw is structured is important. The first section really deals with the administration and the interpretation, how you delineate where zone boundaries are, because the mapping isn't always precise, but how that document's to be read and to be used. The next section deals with general provisions. Now, these are provisions that apply across the board in all land use designation. So Sean was showing you a tool online that where you can search for your property and identify what the zoning is. So once you've used that tool, it's important that you have a look at the zone provisions that deal specifically with your property, which are in section 5. But it's also important that you take a look through the general provisions in section 2 to see if any of those general provisions would specifically apply to your property. So those are, again, regulations that apply across the board to all land use, to all zones in the municipality. Section 3 is something that comes into play when we're considering new development applications, and specifically applications more so applications related to commercial and industrial development, and it's ensuring that the parking and the loading standards are met. These standards are included to make sure that there's not impacts with respect to vehicles parking on roads and safety concerns, that whatever use is proposed, that there is sufficient parking to support that use and sufficient loading spaces for those commercial and industrial uses as well. Section 4 outlines permitted uses. So you'll see this completed in a tabular format, and it identifies specific permitted uses for each of the zones. So these are the things that you're allowed to do on a property. The way a zoning bylaw is constructed is they're constructed in a permissive context, meaning that it identifies those uses that are permitted, and in contrast, the uses that aren't identified are therefore not permitted. So it's these bylaws are written again in a permissive context. Section 5 deals with zone standards. These are things like front yard setbacks, setbacks from the high water mark, side yard setbacks, maximum lot coverage, those sorts of provisions, maximum building height. You'll see those corresponding zone standards in Section 5. Section 6 deals with those unique instances where properties have site-specific zoning. So they may have gone through a zoning bylaw amendment historically to establish site-specific parameters to reflect a unique building or unique lot characteristics, but those are the site-specific exceptions that are identified. We've also cataloged this area as being somewhere, or this section as being somewhere where we identify holding provisions and temporary use zones. So certain properties may have a holding provision, which is a planning tool that's used to identify certain requirements that must be met before development can proceed. For example, servicing may need to be completed before a holding symbol can be removed and development can proceed on a property. So it's a location that we're cataloging or identifying these specific types of holding and temporary use zones. 7 is the definition section, where all of the permitted uses in the bylaw are defined, as well as a number of terms that are used throughout the bylaw are defined. And then Section 8 is really an administrative function. It details how the bylaw is enacted and specifics. One thing just to point out is existing exceptions have been reviewed in detail. So there's a number of exception zones in the current zoning bylaw, and these exception zones have been reorganized in Section 6. A number of them have been deleted, and the reason for that, there could be a number of reasons, but often it's related to the fact that the exception may have existed to allow for construction of a certain building in a location or an addition, and in many instances, when the construction is completed and the building permits has previously been obtained, there's no reason to keep that exception anymore. But from a use perspective, use exceptions have been maintained, but there's many instances where exceptions related to relief from different yard setbacks or performance standards in the bylaw have in fact been removed. Wes, if you'd like to go to the next slide. Just a bit more about the format and the structure of the bylaw. The bylaw has been structured from an exception perspective to, and the key change here is we've included the exceptions in a table format. There's a couple of advantages to that, we believe, is that it makes it fairly easy to understand specifically what the exception is and what the unique situation is on a property. It also makes it fairly easy for staff to administer new exceptions and add them to the bylaw. And it also makes it fairly easy in terms of crafting amendments to the bylaw specifically, and including those amendments in a tabular format too. So that's one of the key modifications that's been made with respect to the format of the bylaw. Something that always comes up with respect to zoning bylaws is we often hear about grandfathering existing uses, and how does the bylaw treat uses that, or buildings and structures that were in effect or existed prior to the passing of the zoning bylaw and don't meet the standards of the proposed zoning bylaw. In essence, the zoning bylaw does grandfather those historic uses and those historic buildings and structures. And what this bylaw does is set a date for the grandfathering, which carries forward from the current zoning bylaw. So the date for determining legal non-conforming and legal non-complying uses is July 28th, 1977. And that corresponds with the passing of the earliest zoning bylaw, or one of the earliest zoning bylaws for the municipality. I think we can flip forward to the next slide there. We have incorporated some transition provisions within the zoning bylaw, and these transition provisions relate to minor variances and the transition of building permits. The intent here is that if someone's obtained a minor variance in recent years, that minor variance would have applied to the current bylaw, and we want to make sure that when the new bylaw comes into play, there's a period of transition, so those folks that haven't enacted on their variance don't lose the permission that they were granted from the previous bylaw. But we do recognize that it's important to include a sunset clause, and what we've identified as a sunset clause of 5 years. We think that's a reasonable time period for anyone that receives a variance under the current bylaw to act on that specific variance. It's problematic if it goes any period longer than that it could be administratively cumbersome for the municipality to search back and understand if in fact there was or wasn't a variance, and whether it should be applicable or not in the future. So we think that 5-year transition period and ultimately sunset clause is an appropriate mechanism in this instance. Secondly, the transition of building permit applications. So applications that implement previously approved planning approvals. So if it was a previously approved site plan or previously approved zoning amendment or minor variance, we think it's important that the bylaw do allow for the issuance of building permits to transition those previous approvals. And really that's a matter of fairness that we think is an important item to ingrain. Next slide. EP zone boundaries. We've included a section in the zoning bylaw related to determining zone boundaries. And we wanted to provide a little bit of flexibility with respect to EP1 and EP2 zone boundaries that allows some refinements to those zone limits without an amendment to the bylaw. Reason for that being is that the zone boundaries for these two zones are not ground truth. They're done at a higher level, or a mapping or aerial photo interpretation level. And what's on the ground might be slightly different than what you can see from in front of a computer from a mapping perspective. So we think from an order of fairness that where it's identified that the EP feature, where it may encroach, for example, into a landscaped yard, that if someone wants to construct an addition to their deck or a small addition to their house, that if that EP zone line's clearly not in the correct location, that there's an environmental feature some distance away that's intended to apply to, that there's an ability to undertake those refinements without an amendment to the actual bylaw. We think that's something that's kind of evolved over time, and it's an important component to provide a little bit of flexibility in the bylaw to reflect what's on the ground. One of the new additions to the bylaw is some overlay zones, and we've got 4 of them that are identified here. The first one relates to the Nipissing Ridge, so that's a feature that's identified in the official plan. There's some specific considerations that prior to development proceeding in proximity to this feature or within this overlay, it must be demonstrated that that there's no impact on the slope, or that the slope has no specific impact on the development that's being proposed. So that's one item. The next 2, the wellhead protection area overlay and the issues contributing area overlay, those are features that were in or have been included in the current zoning bylaw through amendment. They were included as part of the source water protection implementation exercise that was undertaken by the municipality a few years ago. So those overlay zones have been included on the map. The intent of those overlay areas is to ensure the protection of municipal water supplies. And there's some consideration of limited uses that could occur within those areas and before development proceeds in those specific areas. Finally, the Huroney Airport overlay zone is an overlay that's intended to protect the functioning of the airport and specifically limit some uses and building heights within proximity to the airport to ensure the proper functioning of that important piece of municipal infrastructure. Next slide, please. So that this slide is a new item that's been added to the zoning bylaw, and it's something that was discussed through the official plan review process, but it's related to additional dwelling units, and we put in brackets second units. Additional dwelling units is the term now used by the province, and the reason it's additional instead of second, because the province actually requires municipalities to allow for up to 2 dwelling units, 2 additional units per property, when previously the province required 1 additional unit. So that's a little bit of a change in nomenclature there to additional units. Aligned with the official plan, additional units are not permitted through this bylaw in the shoreline residential zone or any limited service zone along the shoreline. So that's one of the key aspects. Additional units are permitted as of right in a number of zones that are listed here, from the rural residential zone through the hamlet residential and on through the agricultural and rural zones. However, there are some provisions that are identified in the zoning bylaw that must be met in order to be eligible for that additional unit. So things like lot size, lot area, and confirmation of servicing and in compliance with those specific zone standards. Finally, standards do include related to lot sizes and ensuring the size of the unit does not exceed 45% of the gross floor area of the dwelling. How's gross floor area calculated? Gross floor area is calculated in accordance with the definition of gross floor area in the bylaw. It's actually, if you were to look at the bylaw, it's under floor area gross, and it defines the outer walls of the dwelling are what's used to establish gross floor area, and it's that the proposal can't be more, the additional unit can't be exceed 45% of that GFA of the principal dwelling unit. Next slide, please. I think Wes, you're going to take over here.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I noticed we've got 23 comments or questions so far in the Q&A, so that means everyone's been able to find that function. Continue to put your questions in there, and as soon as we get through the presentation, which hopefully won't be too much longer, then we'll start to answer those questions. And thanks again for your patience. One of the issues that we did identify in both technical memorandum number 1 and technical memorandum number 2 was whether the municipality should consider permitting backyard chickens or urban chickens within their residential zones within the municipality. There are a number of residents in the township who had requested that the township consider that. The draft of the bylaw that's currently before you for input, review, and comments does not change the current prohibition on backyard chickens from the current zoning bylaw or the municipality's current livestock bylaw. And subject to the public input that we receive during this session, that we receive in the session later this evening, council may provide further direction to the zoning bylaw team to consider options to permit backyard chickens. There were a number of concerns that were identified during our review. In particular, we know that the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture and the Ministry of Agriculture, Rural Affairs both have concerns about backyard chicken programs. And so we thought we would at this point not permit backyard chickens in the new zoning bylaw, and subject to direction from council, it could be considered further in the next draft of the bylaw, or through a different approach that we did identify in technical memorandum number 1. Again, there's a new section in the proposed bylaw dealing with boat docks, both boat docks and boat lifts. This is a new provision for the municipality, and it's something that it's obligated to address both under provincial legislation and some recent court decisions in Ontario. So there are provisions in the new section 2.4 for where docks and boat lifts can be located, both by setbacks from lot lines and within a maximum extension into the water as well. And it's obviously confirmed that you must be the legal owner of the lands where docks will be constructed and connected to the shoreline. And these are all in section 2.4 of the bylaw. There's bunkies are continued and maintained. Both the provisions and the definition are maintained from the current bylaw to the new bylaw. Again, bunkies like in the current bylaw are not permitted to be used for rental purposes or commercial purposes. But what has been clarified in the new bylaw is that bunkies can support and contain a washroom. And that's a change from the current bylaw of the municipality. You'll notice in the draft bylaw, there's a placeholder in the bylaw for provisions and regulations for cannabis production uses. We have not included any provisions at this time. Council has directed that the policies and regulations around cannabis production be part of a separate process. And there recently was a report, the staff reports listed there, that went to council to seek direction and instruction from council to proceed to a separate public consultation and public meeting process with respect to proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw dealing with cannabis production. The proposal in the staff report, which you'll see in the draft official plan amendment and the draft zoning bylaw, is that that cannabis productions would be permitted in the industrial and agricultural and rural designations, but subject to rezoning application. So they would not be permitted or added into the zoning bylaw as of right, but would be subject to application process and criteria in the official plan with respect to the review and the consideration of those applications. For more information on the proposed changes to the planning policies and regulations for cannabis production, you can check the municipality's website. There have been new provisions added to the zoning bylaw with respect to outdoor residential lighting. So definitions and provisions for outdoor residential lighting have been added, and there are some limited regulations with respect to lighting, particularly requiring dark sky compliant lighting, and those are all set out in section 222 of the draft bylaw. The municipality has a number of different legal and legislative approaches to dealing with outdoor residential lighting, particularly as it relates to commercial, industrial, and institutional development. The municipality can regulate new lighting through site plan control, and there's the option of passing a lighting bylaw. At this time, the municipality is proposing some outdoor residential lighting regulations in the bylaw, and we're looking for input and comments from the public with respect to those. There's also new provisions in the bylaw with respect to retaining walls, and those are contained in section 228 of the draft and proposed bylaw. These provisions will go together with the requirements under the Ontario Building Code for when you do and when you don't need a permit under the code for retaining walls. What we've done in the draft zoning bylaw is establish setbacks for those new retaining walls based on the height of the wall. And for retaining walls that are 1 meter or less in height, they would be permitted on property lines. But for retaining walls that are 1 meter in height or greater, they must meet the setbacks for the accessory structures of the applicable zone where the retaining wall is proposed to be constructed. And as I had indicated, the proposed new regulations for retaining walls are contained in section 228. The revisions to the setbacks in the current zoning bylaw for slopes, some may say these changes are significant. Not all slopes are identified in the zoning bylaw or their schedules. The Nipissing Ridge, of course, is a very distinct geographic feature that's been included and designated in the official plan and is included in the new bylaw by way of an overlay zone. But other steep slopes are not. But the bylaw contains a provision that there is setbacks from those steep slopes, which have to be identified as part of building permit or other planning applications. The current bylaw requires a 15-meter setback from a slope that's 1 to 3, or about 73%, whereas the proposed bylaw is requiring a setback of 15 meters where the slope exceeds a 3 to 1 slope or a 33% slope. Understanding that this is a change that may have an impact on property development in Tiny, which is has rolling topography, we've included a transition provision that allows a lesser setback that would be permitted without an amendment to the bylaw where that's approved by the township, particularly the engineering department, based on some information requirements that will have to be submitted to the municipality. Storage containers are continued to be addressed in the bylaw. We've made it absolutely clear that the current prohibition in all residential zones is to be maintained. So storage containers, or C-cans as sometimes they're called, are prohibited in all residential zones in the municipality, and that continued prohibition is maintained. They will be permitted in other zones for personal use up to a maximum of 3 storage containers, subject to the same requirements as any other building or structure in the municipality. So building permit applications, building permit fees, and compliance with the appropriate setbacks like and equal to any other building or structure in the municipality. There is one caveat. The temporary use of storage containers are permitted in the new zoning bylaw for construction uses, for construction storage in particular, for the life of the building permit, but no more than up to a maximum of a 1-year period of time. And again, these are temporary use provisions to allow people to keep their equipment and materials safe and secure during a construction project, but they would need to be removed once the construction project is completed. All of us in Simcoe County have been dealing with the new county waste bins, and in particular in rural and agricultural areas, where we keep those bins so that we can use them on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis has become something that needs to be addressed in the new zoning bylaw. So we've added new provisions in the bylaw in section 217. And the proposed bylaw will permit encroachments in the required front yard for a storage structure to store those county waste bins, to make it a little bit more easy for people to manage filling the bins and getting them out to the road for the truck pickup on the weekly schedule. The proposed provisions would permit the storage structure to be 3 meters from the front lot line, so on private property, 1 meter from the side lot line, and up to a maximum of 5 square meters. We think this is a reasonable size based on the size of the bins that the county has delivered to all its residential properties in the municipality, and based on some review of structures and bins that are available. But we're looking for your comments on this proposed regulations for the county waste bins. Short-term rentals, like the cannabis production facility, is at this point in time a placeholder in the draft bylaw, and we're going to update that once council direction has been received. As people who have been following the short-term rentals issue is aware, council has established a task force which includes local residents, and they're continuing to work on developing a comprehensive response to short-term rentals for the Township of Tiny. That task force is to report to council, and the intent will be subject to the direction and instructions from council. The zoning bylaw will be updated based on those directions and decisions of council, and of course any changes that will happen through the amendment process to the zoning bylaw. If you're looking again for more information regarding the proposed changes for short-term rentals, there is a location on the municipality's website for that information. I think, as Jamie has quickly touched on, there are the EP1 and the EP2 zones in the new bylaw. The EP1 zone reflects the provincially significant wetlands that are contained within the environmental protection designation in the new official plan. The EP2 zone is a new zone, and it includes and identifies all other evaluated wetlands and other wetlands that are 2 hectares or larger or greater that are located within the Greenlands designation in the new official plan. No buildings or structures or site alteration are permitted in both the EP1 and the EP2 zone. The EP2 zone, however, does not include specific setbacks from those zone boundaries. And I think, as Jamie had indicated earlier, refinements to the EP2 zone boundary are permitted without amendment to the bylaw, subject to township review and approval of the submitted information to the municipality. I think also, as Jamie indicated, there is a new Greenlands zone in the zoning bylaw. It's not something that you'll see in the existing bylaw, and it is intended to implement the Greenlands designation in the new official plan. Save and except for the Greenland zone does not include wetlands. Those have been placed in the EP2 zone to provide a greater level of protection for those wetland features. The Greenlands designation is generally reflective of a number of environmental features and functions, but the municipality, through this draft bylaw, is recognizing, in conformity with the official plan, that there will be limited permitted uses within that GL zone to recognize and permit existing uses, but also where you have an existing vacant lot of record that's now within the GL zone, it will also permit single detached residential dwellings and the range of accessory uses that you see listed here. This was a significant change in the new official plan and could have a significant impact on a number of properties in the municipality. And so I think, as Jamie had indicated, through the fairness principle that I think is contained within the new official plan, we're recognizing that those existing lots of record, limited permitted uses would be permitted under the GL zone. Another change in particular that I think has the biggest impact in the shoreline residential area is that the interior side yard setback for new dwellings is set at 3 meters and 1.8 meters, regardless of the number of stories that are proposed. If anyone is familiar with the existing bylaw, as the number of stories changed, there was a greater setback, so a step back from the side property lines that was required. This had a number of impacts, both on the height of building and building shape and building form. which the municipality thought that really wasn't reflective of the goals and objectives in the municipality's official plan. So we have proposed to change that in the new draft bylaw. As well, there are provisions for attached garages and carports contained in the new bylaw that may allow encroachments into the 1.8 meter side yard of the property up to a reduction of 1 meter, subject to meeting the provisions and requirements of the bylaw. So this is a change that I think makes the bylaw more flexible, particularly within the shoreline residential zone in the municipality. We've included provisions for private sports courts, tennis courts, pickleball courts, basketball courts, for example, to regulate and control the location of these activities on the ground. First, they must meet the accessory structure setbacks, which is no different than any other accessory building or structure or use on a property. And there are fencing and lighting provisions contained within the draft bylaw as well, and what we're looking for some comment and feedback on. How we define and determine height of a structure will be changing in the proposed bylaw, subject to public input. Currently, it is determined at the midpoint between the peak and the eaves. A recent minor variance and building permit activity in the municipality has demonstrated that through multiple changes in roof heights and roof pitches and roof types, it's become much more challenging to deal with building height, and we've been seeing an increase in building height, particularly in the shoreline area in the municipality. So this change, along with the other changes to the setbacks, we believe that this will result in better and more consistent built form within the shoreline area of the township. So I know that's been a very quick high-level overview of the draft bylaw. It's 40 pages in length. So we're hoping that the residents can review it and provide their comments. We're looking for comments today. I think we're up to 38 so far, but comments can be submitted to the municipality at the zoning bylaw email address, which I'll highlight in a second, up to and including March 17th. So there's some additional time after today's open houses to submit comments. The intention is that we will pull all those comments together in a what we heard report with recommended revisions based on the public input and comment that will go to council. Subsequent to council direction, we'll be scheduling the statutory public meeting under the Planning Act and prepare the bylaw for council consideration and enactment. This is how you can stay engaged in the process. The email address, as Sean had indicated, is at newzoningbylaw@tiny.ca. The webpage for the project is listed there as well. And if you aren't already connected through Tiny Connect, please do that at the web address that's located there. And you can include the new zoning bylaw, new Tiny zoning bylaw in your preferences, and all notices with respect to the project will be sent to you directly. I believe that's it. Yes, Sean. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Wes. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions, which I'm really happy to see. And thank you, 71 participants today. That's a lot higher than I was hoping for. So thank you all for your time for coming out. I do want to recognize, although this is not a council meeting, we do have participating today and listening to the discussion, our mayor, George Cornell, and our councillor, Cindy Hastings. So thank you very much for attending. And I also want to recognize that we also have our CAO, Robert Lamb, as well as our Chief Municipal Law Enforcement Officer, Steve Harvey, listening to the questions and listening to the presentation. So thank you for coming out today. Yeah, I'm going to run through the questions and I'll turn it over to Wes and Jamie. to answer them. So question one is in section 223, the guidelines around additional dwelling units and detached accessory buildings are outlined. However, I could not determine how a basement, garage, cellar, sunroom factor into the gross floor area with respect to the 45% of principal residence limit. Is the gross floor area limited by the maximum lot coverage, or is there another formula definition of where it can be accessed? As a side note, the maximum height seems to differ for the residence and accessory. Actually, maybe we'll leave it at that first question first.
Yeah, maybe I can deal with that, Sean. I think I tried to deal with it in the presentation. But from a GFA perspective, there is a definition of gross floor area, and it's under floor area gross in the definition section of the bylaw. And I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but it speaks towards the outer walls of the building being included. So that's the parameter that you'd use to base the 45% off of. I think that's what the question was related to.
And there are specific exclusions from the determination of gross floor area that's listed in the definition.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. As a side note, the maximum height seems to differ for the residence and accessory residence, and the gross floor area does not seem to provide for stairwell space, not being usable living space or insulation thickness. I'm not sure if this warrants further discussion. I think you've answered that, but if that does not answer the question, please email us and we can continue to clarify and get answers for that question. Second question from the same participant. The definitions of home occupation and home industry were not updated, even though the public survey that was conducted showed over 70% support for a permissive and encouraging definition that would establish a list of prohibited uses and permit all other uses. Was there a reason that this was not implemented, or is it possibly addressed elsewhere?
Do you want me to deal with this, Wes, and then you get the next one?
Sure.
Maybe we can do that. We can switch off. That's the way we can be looking
Sounds like a plan.
one question ahead all the time. Okay. The definitions of home industry and home occupation haven't changed, but if you look at the general provisions section in section 2.14 and 2.15 dealing with home industries and home occupations, there have been some changes to some of the permissions in that are allowed, and they've been made a little bit more permissive than the current approach. So that's where the change has been made, not in the definition, but in the actual provisions that apply.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Next question. I'd like the planning team to speak to inclusive zoning practices, basement apartments, secondary suites, townhomes, mid-rise buildings, basically anything other than single detached homes. Which are approaching 1 million each in this climate and housing crisis, are not allowed in the township's communities. How is this fair for Canadians, working people, families who need to put food on the table? Zoning is one piece of the puzzle to protecting future generations and the human right of putting a roof over their head. This bylaw seems very concerned about preserving the status quo instead of making life better.
So two quick responses there, Sean. We have included within the proposed bylaw specific provisions for additional residential units in many zones in the municipality, save and except for the shoreline residential and the LSR zone, but in rural residential, country residential, hamlet residential, in the rural and AZ zones. Not only would a second additional residential unit be permitted, but a third unit in an accessory building would also be permitted. And I think that is going a long way to not only implementing the official plan, but permitting some additional, hopefully more affordable housing to be created in the municipality, subject to the regulations that are in the proposed bylaw. Tiny, as a rural agricultural municipality, is to some extent restricted by the fact that it does not have any fully serviced settlement areas, and so its ability to accommodate higher density building forms, missing middle, et cetera, is to some extent limited. That's not to say that the municipality wouldn't give fair consideration to those types of applications, but they would have to be driven by an application basis, and in particular, their ability to meet the servicing requirements of not only the township, but the province as well.
Thanks, Wes. Our next question is, with regards to backyard chickens, technical memo 1 and 2 both included recommendations in favor of backyard chickens in residential property subject to regulations. This support was echoed by 68% of residents in the public input survey. The new draft bylaw now has no mention of backyard chickens, and the open house memo includes continued prohibition in residential areas, which is in opposition of MHPC recommendation. Why is there now no mention of this in the draft bylaw? And what was the rationale here?
Wes, you want to take that
Sure,
one?
I'll take this question, Jamie. So in our reports to council, we identified an option of including provisions and regulations in the new bylaw for backyard chickens. We did identify a number of problems with including them within the zoning bylaw, and identified an option for council, if they so choose, to permit backyard chickens through a temporary use bylaw. And that was something that while we proposed to council, we thought we would seek further public input to see whether the support was still strong to consider that. And subject to those voices being expressed and council hearing them, and us receiving direction and instructions from council, we could go back to consider that option that we identified in technical memorandum number 1 and 2 with respect to a temporary use bylaw approach to considering backyard chickens. So that's where we are right now. And if the community is still strongly in support and subject to council's direction, we could be looking at it again through another process.
Okay, thanks, Wes. Next question, how were memos and notices given to property owners? I can actually take that question. As a follow-up to the official plan project, we had a list of property owners and residents that we had through that process, and we kicked off the zoning bylaw project. We sent specific letters of commencement for the zoning bylaw to make sure that we had those individuals notified through this specific project. In addition to that, with regards to the open house, the Planning Act requires that a notice be put in the paper, which we did, as well as we notified anybody who'd provided correspondence to the municipality, either through the email or in writing to the township, which we have a list of. So we've ensured that we've kept all of our, met all of our obligations under the Planning Act for notification. And then in addition to that, we have a project webpage that has all the information that's gone to council, the reports, the memos, and timeline, and all the up-to-date information is available all in one spot. So that answers that question. Next question, MHPC is a planning firm from the GTA, an area that deals with the missing middle. How come this isn't being addressed? Let's learn from other municipalities like Mississauga and Toronto, and not make the same mistakes. Also, for every townhome, mid-rise building, we will see less encroachment in our agricultural lands as we inevitably grow, which are very important to tiny residents. I understand there are issues around servicing septic, but with the creative minds at the table, I'm sure solutions and site-specific basis can be achieved. I think that Wes, you've spoken to that a little bit already.
Yeah, maybe just to build on what Wes's previous comments were related to servicing limitations, is that the zoning bylaw does, the official plan and the zoning bylaw work together. So the official plan designates lands that are required to support growth, and the zoning bylaw establishes permitted uses. And the permitted uses that have been outlined in the zoning bylaw are really reflective, and again, these are as of right permitted uses, in terms of building forms, are reflective of the servicing capabilities that exist on individual services. If someone was to propose a multi-unit development or in a medium density type housing style in one of the settlement areas, and it could be accommodated based on servicing with their proposal, the municipality is certainly inclined to look at that and evaluate it. And I think that's what Wes was speaking to previously. One final note is that from a growth management perspective, Tiny is not a high growth area. Growth in the big picture in the county is directed to the urban settlement areas, and in North Simcoe, that's Midland and Penetanguishene. So that's where, from a regional perspective, it's how growth is managed, but the focus of regional growth is to those service settlement areas. So I think that's all that we really need to add to that. But the township is certainly open to creative solutions and creative developers that are looking for servicing options that could be provided within the settlement areas.
Thanks, Jamie. The next question, I'll just read it. My parents bought 2 properties about 40 years ago. One parent is on title for the first property and both my parents are on title for the other. They are adjacent properties. What happens to the ownership when one parent passes away? Do the 2 lots merge?
I can answer this real quick. I know it's not a zoning bylaw question, but I'm sure other people might have it. There's a number of factors at play. How the lots were created is a key factor. They could merge. It's really a legal question. It's not so much a planning question. However, I will say that the province has enacted new legislation, and Wes might know the bill number off the top of his head. I can't recall it, but came into effect in January, and there was changes to this to the legislation that really prevents these properties from merging where they might otherwise have merged. But that is, again, a legal question, so don't take a planner's advice on it, is all I could say on that piece. But you should consult a lawyer.
Thanks, Jamie. Next question, what scientific studies methods were used to determine what was EP? I can answer that question. There's 2 EP categories in the zoning bylaw. EP1, which are provincially significant wetlands, as was touched on in the presentation. That mapping comes from the province, the Ministry of Natural Resources, all those layers. So that's very specific coming from the province, and we have to abide by that and ultimately show those wetlands. The other wetlands, the EP2 zone, some of it comes from the county as other evaluated wetlands, and then some of it comes from a detailed review that was done as part of the Township of Tiny official plan, called a natural heritage study that was done by the Severn Sound Environmental Association, which did a detailed desktop review, an aerial photo interpretation to determine where these other wetlands are in the municipality. And that's what forms the EP2 zone. And what was also touched on in the presentation is that we've built in regulations in the zoning bylaw that allow flexibility of where there's incorrect mapping related to wetlands. So we don't have to go through a full zoning amendment process. Refinements can ultimately be made. So that answers that question. Thank you. Next question, why was it decided to continue with the bylaw prohibiting backyard chickens? I think we've touched on that one already.
Sean, just to reiterate, we did receive, prior to the open house, a number of comments with respect to the backyard chickens program, and we've heard comments today, and those will obviously form part of the report that will go to council on the draft bylaw.
Thanks, Wes. Next question, maybe get a copy of the Q&A answers emailed to us after the webinar, or maybe access Q&A answers on the website. What we're actually going to do is this meeting is being recorded we're actually going to look at posting this on the project webpage if that's a possibility. So that's what we're gonna try to do with both of these presentations, the afternoon one and the evening one, so that everybody can access the information for those folks that want to go back, or for folks who haven't been able to watch the presentation. Next question. Ontario law states that when two adjacent lots are owned by the same entity, they will merge into title. Okay, so we've already answered that merging question, Jamie. Thank you. We have a comment like the table formats. That's good. That with regards to the exceptions. Thank you. Another question. Oh, okay. Same question. Now we have a question about short-term rentals. Like Wes mentioned in the presentation, it's being specifically dealt with by the task force that's been appointed by council. So we're not, that task force is doing the work to prepare rules and regulations or recommend rules and regulations to council. So we won't get into those short-term rental questions at this point. Another short-term rental question. Question on the interactive zoning map. Is it possible to conduct a search by zone? Is it possible to conduct a search to show me all shoreline commercial lots or otherwise? That's not a feature that's currently that you can actually search by zone. You have to search by address or roll number. Alternatively, like I demonstrated this morning, you can also search by going through the actual map and toggling around. Another short-term rental question, and I know it's an extremely hot topic. You get a copy of the recording. I've answered that question. Okay, what was the reason for excluding SR and LSR from additional dwelling units?
I can take that one. So again, this flows from this is an implementation piece from the official plan. The official plan does not allow the second dwelling units in the shoreline, along the shoreline, and similarly, the reason for not allowing them in the zoning bylaw really comes down to that the premise behind second dwelling units is related to affordable housing and providing additional affordable housing options, whereas shoreline development exists on the shoreline because of the recreational nature of that. Certainly there are some of these dwellings that are occupied year round, but the premise at a high level is that the planned function of these areas is for resource-based recreational uses. It's because they're adjacent to the lake and because they're on the lake. So for that reason, for that principal reason, second units haven't been permitted as of right along the shoreline. What the result of potentially allowing it, second dwelling units in those areas, could be an overpopulation or over densification of shoreline areas and the recreational areas of the municipality, and that's really the reason why. What's been proposed here is not dissimilar to what's proposed in other shoreline municipalities and lake-based development. Most, if not all, municipalities that I'm familiar with that have lake-based development do not permit second units in shoreline areas. And again, I'm not speaking about within a settlement area. We're talking about outside of settlement areas and areas for recreational purposes. So it's a consistent approach to what other municipalities have done in the province.
Thanks, Jamie. And I will note that through the official plan public process, we also heard a lot of comments for in support of not permitting additional units in the shoreline, including beach density, parking, private servicing, as a number of comments that we heard. So we have another question. I believe my property and many others in the shoreline could provide affordable housing to family. Jamie, you've already spoken to that. The additional unit in the shoreline residential and limited service residential zones. Next question. We have a vacant lot with an old building on it. We also have a building permit for a new building. We will start building within the next 6 months. Will the zoning change still happen for a lot? It is now greenbelt and it shows in the new drafting as it will soon change to greenlands in EP2. Will this affect our building permit? What will it change for us?
So Sean, I think as Jamie indicated in the presentation, we've included a number of transition provisions in the draft bylaw to recognize that people are in the process, either in the planning process with minor variances, or they, in good faith, they've submitted complete building permit applications and may have even obtained their building permit. So those transition provisions, I mean, I don't know the details of this particular property, but the intent of the bylaw is to recognize that where people have gone through the process in good faith and obtained the necessary municipal planning and building approvals, that they will be able to realize on those permits and complete their construction.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. And for this specific one, if a building permit has been issued, in this case, regardless of what the new zoning bylaw does, you will be able to proceed with that permit. Next question. Given the chronic and increasing need for attainable affordable housing within the township, I encourage reconsideration to allow additional units in more zones. I think we've spoken to that already. It will be allowed in all zones other than in the shoreline residential, limited service residential, and EP zones. We have a comment here. Thank you for allowing bathrooms and bunkies. Amazing. Thanks for that comment. With regards to backyard chickens, the surrounding townships had similar responses regarding the impact, and yet they still proceeded, both full-scale and pilot programs. How come this wasn't considered?
Subject to input and direction from council, it may be considered.
Would just recommend any of those specific comments with regards to backyard chickens or any other, just please submit an email to the project, and they will be reviewed as part of draft 1 and reported back to council. We have a question about short-term rentals, which we're not going to answer in this process. Spoken to the backyard chicken questions. I'd like to ask council for revision of the camping bylaw on private property. I've camped on my lot for 13+ years and until recently has never been an issue. Can I apply for a variance or pay an annual fee similar to parking permit or fire permit? I think I can maybe take a stab at this. So with regards to the current zoning bylaw, we do have a prohibition on backyard camping where there's an existing residence. We have changed the regulation to open up camping for as an accessory residential where you have an existing house. So for example, kids tenting in the backyard, things like that, to make sure that those types of uses are not prohibited. The camping on a vacant lot would continue to be prohibited in the new bylaw. So if somebody was to wanted to proceed with camping on a vacant lot, that would require a rezoning application, as that is a prohibited use in the bylaw. Anything else you want to add there, Jamie or Wes?
No, I
think. Thanks, Sean. You think you covered it?
Okay. Next question. I'd rather see Tiny focus its energy on more paid parking areas on each concession. So I think we have a parking question here.
Yeah, we can make sure that this gets to council. I don't think it's a specific zoning issue, Sean. I think it's more about the paid parking program and expanding the paid parking program.
Yeah, okay. And I will note that that parking is being addressed by council right now, and there actually is a report on the next council agenda with regards to that. Backyard picking question. Another next question. I've been in conversations with companies. They listened to a couple of companies there about their construction of new homes on low-rise affordable housing using shipping containers as the base structure.
Do you want me to?
Would those be permitted given the prohibition on sea containers? If not, I'll be sending in more info. I strongly recommend this to be reconsidered. Jamie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, I can take it. So the shipping container restriction is about shipping containers being used for storage purposes and looking like shipping containers, I guess, at the end of the day. It's not about the ability to construct other buildings, be it a dwelling unit or even an accessory building out of a shipping container. So that those are permitted subject to the zoning bylaw. So there's many examples where municipalities have seen shipping containers being used in residential construction, for example, and that would be permitted in tiny townships, subject to meeting the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. So typically you'd need things like an engineer to sign off on the structure to ensure that the structural integrity and mechanics of that structure and insulation, et cetera, meet the Ontario Building Code before the building official would sign off. So,
and you pay all the normal and standard building permit and development charge fees that you would for a standard stick-built dwelling as well.
correct.
Thanks, Jamie and Wes. Next question, who is on the short-term task force committee? How is it selected? I would just recommend that anybody interested specifically in that topic, we have a web page dedicated to that topic where all of the agendas, minutes, and even the live YouTube feeds of those meetings are available for public viewing. And one about short-term rentals. In regards to using sea containers, is there any information on using shipping containers as buildings? Well, you guys have just answered that question. Next question, in the house where my son grew up, we always camped out in the backyard at least a few times every summer. Just as fun, no cost way to create fun and memories. I agree it would be a shame to prohibit backyard camping in the bylaws. And again, we have changed, loosened the regulations to make sure that backyard camping where there's a house on the property would be permitted.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I can't find it very quickly here, Sean, but that was one of the new changes to the bylaw where an existing residential dwelling on a property that, temporary, occasional use of tents in the backyard for kids, families, etc., would be permitted by the bylaw. I just can't find exactly where we included that in the bylaw.
Okay, thanks, Wes. Another short-term rental question. Backyard chickens, visiting the public interest, reassessing at a later date with no commitment sounds very vague. We already have public interest. Why would we need to reassess and spend additional resources? I think we've already answered that question with regards to backyard chickens. Please, this will be looked at when we review draft 1. What timeline is expected for the bylaw to govern the requirements for planning purposes? Does that mean permit applications will require to meet the old bylaw requirements until this is enacted? Jamie or Wes?
Sure. So until the new bylaw is passed by council and it makes its way through the statutory appeal period, the existing bylaw will remain in force and effect. And so building permits, complete building permit applications that are submitted until the new bylaw comes into force and effect will be reviewed and determined under the existing bylaw. And I think as we indicated in the presentation, where you have submitted a complete application and in good faith going through the process, and you get caught in that transition period, the bylaw includes a provision that will allow the issuance of that building permit in keeping with the existing bylaws or the current bylaws, standards and provisions.
Thanks, Wes. The next question, would you kindly repeat about where to access the Q&A answers? As I noted before, what we're gonna try to do is post both sessions on the project webpage so folks can see exactly what happened at the 2 open houses. Next question, if bunkies are now allowed bathrooms, how must one go about dealing with septic connections, etc.? I can answer that one. So if somebody is proposing a bunkie under the new zoning bylaw and they do want to put in a bathroom, all the requirements of the Ontario Building Code would have to be met with regards to the construction as well as septic capacity. That would be reviewed at the building permit stage. Shoreline residential being for recreation only, this I do not agree with. The municipality seems to be speaking out of both sides of their mouth. If it is for recreation only, then maybe another STR question. Oh, we have submitted emails to new zoning bylaw @pine.ca regarding backyard chickens, and the answer was vague at best. We do, just so for anybody listening, we do have an automated response, but we are tallying every email that comes in, and it will be put into a matrix and reported back to council with every comment that comes in. So please do provide us with all your comments. Next question, does Tiny have plans for further bike lanes? Great question. Actually, this is being dealt with through the Township of Tiny Transportation Master Plan. So there is a master plan, transportation master plan that's looking at all types of transportation throughout the township, and was recently presented to council. So that report is available on the Township of Tiny website. Not find that document on the website, then please let us know, and we'll get you the correct link. Just a comment about the storage containers. They were happy with the answer, so thank you. Next question, I reviewed the general provision section in combination with the definition section with regards to home industry permitted uses, but there is no reference to specific uses. What is and what is not allowed, if you could speak to the specific uses?
So I'm wondering, yeah, Sean, there's a couple questions in this, and it seems to be very specific to a property. I'm wondering if we could get Chris to submit an email to the project email address, and then we can review it and provide a little bit more fulsome response than we have the time to do. We're going to need to review the draft bylaw and provide a detailed response.
Okay, no, that's fair, Wes. Thanks for that. So Chris, if you could please do that, send us an email, and if we need to set up a meeting either virtually or in person, then we can do that, or a phone call to get that question answered.
The only thing I'd just like to say to the first part of that, where I think the respondent or the person asking the question was getting to the point of what types of uses constitute home industries or home occupations. And it's really a variety of uses could constitute a home industry. But there's certain requirements that are necessary to be met in the general provisions. And those requirements ensure that the intensity of use of that home industry is limited in scale. So it could be a small manufacturing, could be machine shop, could be any sort of related use to that that occurs in an accessory building, but it would again need to meet the requirements of the bylaw. As far as a home occupation, any sort of use that could occur within the house. So it could be a home-based office business, whether it be like dental, doctor, legal, accounting, those sorts of things could be considered home occupations. But again, there's limitations that limit the scale and intensity of use of those items. But yes, the rest of it we can address through a response to an email.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Next question, if a new bunkie is small enough that a building permit would normally not be required, which would in the current building code would be 108 square feet, would it be correct to assume that you do not need a building permit if you want to put a bathroom in?
Or you do need a building permit.
Sorry, you do need a building permit if you
And that's a correct assumption, is that when you're putting any plumbing in, connecting it up to the septic system, a building permit would be required in that instance.
Okay, next comment. Somebody would be interested in the link. Please just email. I'm assuming that's with regards to the transportation master plan. Please send us an email to the project webpage, and we'll make sure that we get you that link. Next question, for SR and LSR properties with detached accessory buildings, would a living area be permitted to be built on a second story above the garage? So I can answer that. So the answer would be no. Living space continues not to be permitted in an accessory structure. If somebody wanted to build a bunkie, it would be a separate standalone structure. And that concludes all of the questions and answers. Jamie and Wes, do you guys have any closing remarks as you wrap up today?
Not on any of the specific questions that have been raised, but I would just like to thank everybody for taking the time to come out today and provide their comments. What's important here is we're striving to get the best document possible for the township that addresses the current and hopefully some of the future needs of the residents and the municipality. So it's really important that we get this feedback, that we can try to do our best to tailor the document accordingly to meet those requirements. So thanks again for everybody for taking the opportunity today.
Yeah. And just a reminder, comments can be submitted until March 17th. So if you have additional comments or questions, please submit them to the project email address before the end of the day on the 17th.
Okay, thanks, guys. Just a couple more questions that came in. Loose dog on the beach question. That's not a zoning related issue. So the municipal bylaws would deal with loose dogs on public beaches, township beaches. So any specific questions on that, please contact our bylaw enforcement department. Question with regards to an outhouse and a composting toilet. Please get in touch. I don't have an answer for you, but if you could please get in touch with our Township of Tiny sewage system inspector. His information is available on the website. He'll be able to answer that question for you. Getting a bunch of additional questions here, guys. What's the email address again for feedback? What is it again, Wes?
New zoning bylaw at tiny.ca. New zoning bylaw at tiny.ca.
What quick question about when the new bylaw will come into effect? We're anticipating it's going to be coming into effect this year. It won't come into effect until after we report back to council. As far as next steps, we're reporting back to council on all feedback with regards to draft 1. And then we will be revising the document as directed. And then we'll be having a public meeting. And then we'll be coming back to council for adoption. So later this year is all I could say. What is the legal definition of a bunkie? The bunkie definition is in the text of the bylaw. So please visit the project webpage and you will find the definition of monkey in the bylaw.
And then also have a look at section 2.1.5 of the draft bylaw. There's provisions in there that speak to maximum size of the bunkie. For example, it's 30 square meters, and there's some other provisions in there too.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie and Wes, for the presentation and for the answers to all those questions. Thank you all for participating today, for coming out to learn more about the bylaw. Like Wes said, we just encourage everyone to submit comments to the end of next week. Doesn't mean that questions, comments won't be reviewed after that date, but it won't be reviewed specifically with regards to draft one. They will be reviewed as part of the overall project. And thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.